I almost didn't stop. I was walking back to my car, the day was done. I had pictures to the church, the old town gate, the mission with a blue dome, and I was satisfied. Tired in that good way you get after a long walk with a camera. Then I saw it. Not the cactus, the shadow. I think what this photo is actually about is persistence. That was the feeling I had when I took this photo. The persistence of things that don't ask permission, that grow in the cracks, that cast shadows twice their size because the light can't help but notice them. I've been walking around Old Town San Diego for a few hours by that point. It's a strange place, beautiful, a little performative, layered with history that has been polished up for tourists, but it's still genuinely there if you look. Old adobes, mission architecture, the birthplace of California, at least that's what the sign says. When I'm traveling or walking through a city, the most interesting moment may happen at noon. Not 2 hours before sunset, the streets are active, people are moving, and the light creates patterns that simply don't exist later in the day. Instead of fighting harsh sunlight, I try to use it. I look for strong shadows, bright walls, silhouettes, reflections, and small areas of light surrounded by darkness. Midday sun can turn an ordinary street into something graphic and dramatic, just like in the case of this cactus, casting a large shadow against a white wall. And Little Italy was a perfect place to put the idea into practice. By the time I arrived, the sun was high, the sidewalks were bright, and the shadows were cutting sharply across the buildings. It wasn't the soft light photographers usually wait for, but the neighborhood was alive. People were eating outside, servers were moving between tables, and pedestrians kept passing through narrow pockets of light. Instead of wishing for better conditions, I started looking at what the midday sun was giving me. Bold contrasts, strong shapes, reflections, and moments that only existed right then. In this case, I do love the contrast between the green and the red, and the umbrella, or the tree casting a large shadow, almost as if it's competing with for tallness with the building. Golden hour at the beach has a way of making things a bit more intentional. The light is warmer, everything feels more intentional. You can turn ordinary moments into special moments, like those two individuals sitting, waiting for the sunset, or families walking the shoreline, trying to get a glimpse of the sunset and the reflections on the ocean waves. Capturing murals in cities is something I do enjoy doing. It shows the history and the culture of a city that is presented in art. In this instance, this was right around midday. I had my coffee, took a turn into an alley, and came across this mural. It was midday. The sun was partly blocking the sunshine, but at least it created pockets of shade and narrow beams of light. In this instance, I was waiting for the perfect subject to walk into the frame, but quite honestly, the weather was way too hot. I waited, but trust me, I couldn't wait any longer, so I just took a picture of the blank mural without any subject in it, and I believe the mural itself became the subject. It would be nice to have someone walking into the frame, but sometimes you just don't get lucky. But the same way, it still told a beautiful story about the history of that city and the artists that made this beautiful art. After spending the day moving between bright beaches, busy streets, and shaded alleys, it was time to put the camera down and slow everything back down. We headed back to the Welk in Escondido, away from the crowds and the noise of the city. The pace changed almost immediately. No more chasing light or waiting for the right person to enter the frame. Just a quiet evening, some space to breathe, and time to recharge. Not every part of a travel story has to be dramatic. Sometimes the rest at the end of the day is what gives everything else meaning. After getting some rest at a walk, the next stop was Balboa Park, and this time I wanted to slow down and be more intentional with every frame. Balboa Park gives you a lot to work with. Arches, courtyards, long walks, gardens, performers, you name it, they got it. And part of it was trying to create a minimalist frame, and it is really difficult to do that when a place is very busy, very crowded with people everywhere. But being persistent and take your time and trying to frame with intentionality, you can capture pictures that tell a really good story, and by way of framing your subject that gives meaning to the story. Framing with intentionality is really about deciding what belongs in the story and what does not. And persistence is staying there long enough for the story to finally come together. And as photographers, sometimes you just have to be persistent enough to capture the right frame and the right story that you're trying to tell. Persistence eventually leads to a bigger question. What actually makes you stop and take a picture? Sometimes it's the light, sometimes it's a gesture, a color, a shadow, or the way someone briefly fits into the scene. You may not fully understand why it caught your attention. You just feel that something is there. But noticing the moment is only the beginning. The first frame may not tell the whole story. You might need to move, simplify the composition. I stopped here because the scene felt quiet, almost suspended. The path naturally pulls your eye towards a small shelter in the distance, but everything around it feels open and still. There are no people, no obvious action, and no dramatic light. Just space, distance in a place that looks like it's waiting for someone. Maybe it was waiting for me. What drew me in was a contrast between the wide, empty foreground and a single structure tucked into the trees. It made the image feel less like a landscape and more like a pause. The emotion for me is solitude, but not loneliness. It feels calm, reflective, and slightly unfinished, like the beginning of a story rather than the end of one. Sometimes I stop to take a picture because something spectacular is happening. Other times, I stop because nothing is happening, and that silence becomes the story. Harsh light as a way of exposing everything. The shadows are deeper, the highlights are brighter, and there's nowhere for the scene to hide. But that doesn't mean there isn't a photograph there. The cactus is a good reminder of that. It grows in difficult conditions, adapts to what is given, and still finds a way to become part of the landscape. Photography can work the same way. You won't always get perfect light, perfect background, or a perfect moment. Sometimes you have to move, wait, reframe, and keep looking until the scene begins to make sense. Persistence doesn't guarantee an easy photograph. It gives you the chance to create a meaningful one. And sometimes the most beautiful pictures come from learning how to work with the conditions you originally wanted to avoid. So always ask yourself, what made you stop? Why did you stop to take a picture? What emotions did you feel when you took that picture? Or what emotions were evoked the moment you pressed the shutter? Thank you, and see you in the next episode.